Ouvir seu podcast favorito já virou tradição, né? Tipo Chester Perdigão no Natal. Afinal, só Perdigão tem Chester.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I am delighted to have you with me here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Please, if you will text the word Army to 33777, particularly those of you on the live stream or the podcast, here's why. I want to recruit some of you into my shenanigans. So, like for example, we're looking at some radio stations that are interested in putting us on, and it would be helpful for people in those local markets to be able to just send a note and say, yeah, I already listen on the live stream or the podcast in this area. And if you're willing to do that, just text Army to 33777 and put in your name, email, zip code, so we can flag where you are and when the time comes, be able to send you a note. And also, when we do our live broadcast around the country that we're going to start doing, being able to just let you know we're going to be in your area. We'd love to have you come hang out for an event. We'll be in Las Vegas in a couple of days. We were just in Tulsa. They got to be in Jacksonville for an event in December, and then it'll be a whirlwind next year. So text the word Army to 33777. I would appreciate it very much. We got to dive into this. I saw this tweet from, well, let me just read you the guy's description. His name is Rick Taylor. Rick Taylor describes himself this way: former Democratic Senate for U.S. Senate from Ohio, still fighting to rebuild a coalition of the working class. We can reassert our power and improve our lives. That's Rick Taylor, former candidate for the United States Senate in Ohio. He was a Democratic Party candidate. He lost. Looks like let's see. He ran for the election. He wound up not appearing on the ballot. He's from Euclid, Ohio. So he said he was running, but he didn't quite manage to pull it off. Now, I say this and I read you his description because it's important you hear again his description. Former Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate from Ohio, still fighting to rebuild a coalition of the working class. The working class, of course, went for Donald Trump. The working class went for Donald Trump. This is his tweet. My aunt called asking about Thanksgiving plans. During the conversation, she mentioned she voted for Trump. I told her my home is not open to traitors, and I would not go to theirs. I have no space in my life for those who could care less about the United States. She's upset. FAFO. That stands for F around and find out. That's a candidate who wants to rebuild ties to the working class for the Democratic Party. And I'm hearing this a lot. Now, there are people on the right who've done this as well. I know a lady in Atlanta. She's very mad at me for being supportive of Donald Trump this time. Cussed me out. I had a relationship with her for some time, and she says in 2020, at her mother's funeral, her brother began needling her about not supporting Donald Trump at the funeral. People on both sides are treating it as team sport. That's where I think a lot of the stolen election stuff in 2020 comes from, is people are treating it as team sport. If your team doesn't win, it's the refs, it's the umpires, somebody cheated. It's you can't take the loss. You got to root for your team, and your team says, well, the refs. Well, it was the refs. Who cares about how bad you played? It's the refs. And in this team sport thing, the Georgia fans and the Alabama fans, they don't get along. I mean, people in the South and the SEC teams, I got bunches of friends who have license plates on the front of their cars, a house divided. You got a Tennessee fan and a Georgia fan in the same house. You got a Vandy fan and an Auburn fan in the same house. Boy, the poor Auburn people this year looking at Vandy thinking, my God, what happened to them? You got an LSU fan and you got an Ole Miss fan in the same house. A house divided. It's team sport. And you get along fine except teams. Except the problem here is as politics becomes the dominant team and religion for people on the left, they don't have in secularism a concept of loving your neighbor. See, this is where there's this effort to deconstruct faith. You hear about it. I'm going to deconstruct my faith. And essentially what it means is I'm going to tear down the elements of my faith and then repackage it in a way that I like. Essentially, you're going to make yourself God, and your religion is going to wind up looking exactly like you. Your religion is going to sound just like you. It's not a coincidence that so many people who have walked away from the Christian faith claiming they're deconstructing it are people who've become allies of the LGBTQ community, when so much of the Christian faith, the Islamic faith, the Jewish faith is antithetical to those progressive values. You got to love your neighbor. That doesn't mean affirm your neighbor. Well, that's not enough for the deconstructionists. It always is. I had a pastor friend of mine say one time, and he's right, that in this day and age, most of the people who leave the Christian faith leave over sexual sin of one kind or another. And he's not wrong. It's true. You come up with other excuses, but that's really why you do it. Sexual sin. The other reason is a pridefulness, that you've decided that, so Christians believe we're just through the Reformation, sola scriptura, the idea that God only speaks through Scripture. The problem is there are a lot of people out there who've decided that just because we believe God only speaks through the Scripture, that therefore God only speaks to me. So who cares that you have 2,000 years of Christian orthodoxy? Well, by God, I read Scripture this way, therefore I must be right. St. Augustine, Polycarp, who's that guy? No, I read the line this way, therefore I'm right. I only read the red letters. That's the one that gets me the most. That's the funniest one to me, is the red letter Christians. The red letter Christians, they believe that only the red letters in the Bible matter. You want my most controversial theological belief? It's one I've never uttered on radio before. I've literally never said this on radio before. My most controversial theological belief, and one day if I ever pursue a doctorate in theology, this is what I want to write my thesis on. John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him would have everlasting life. It's in red letters. My most controversial theological belief is that there is no way, based on my knowledge of the hypostatic union and the message of the Apostle John and how he was written, that Jesus said those words. It should not be red letters. Jesus, in chapter 3 of the book of John, would not have said that referencing himself. It was John writing those words. And by the way, whether you agree with me or not, you should understand that punctuation, syntax, and quotation marks were real different back then. And I don't know if y'all know this or not, but Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did not write in red ink. It was later people who came along and decided, I'm going to change the words that I believe are attributed to Jesus and put them in red ink. And there you got these crazy Christians out there, and Christians, I should say, in air quotes, I'm only going to believe the red letters of the Bible. Well, he says a lot of stuff in the red letters, referencing stuff in the black letters, and apparently you're going to ignore the black letters even though he referenced them. It's just a bunch of garbage. It's people redefining God in their own image, and that's what the left is doing in the absence of God. They become their own God, and the difference between the God of the Bible and the God that we create is none of our gods have grace and mercy. Maybe mercy, but never grace. You see, what is the shortcut definitions for grace and mercy? What's the difference between the two? Mercy is sparing someone from something they deserve. You deserve to burn in hell. I'm going to spare you from that. I'm merciful. You deserve to be deprived of your life because you're a polluter. I'm going to spare you from that. I'm merciful. Every religion has mercy. Islam is big on mercy. What no religion has other than Christianity. Not making this up. No religion except the Christian religion actually has a concept of grace. Now, there are people who say yes, but when you actually examine it, it's just a repackaging of mercy. And what is mercy? Mercy is sparing you from something you deserve. So what is grace? Grace is giving you something you don't deserve. Mercy is keeping you from what you deserve, and grace is giving you what you don't deserve. You don't deserve to go to heaven. You're a sinner. So am I. None of us deserve to go to heaven. God shows us mercy. He spares us from hell, and he gives us grace. He gives us heaven. He substitutes Christ for us. What the left doesn't have is a concept of grace, and this is going to trip them up over time. And you see it with this guy from Ohio. He can't have dinner with his aunt because she voted for Donald Trump. He can't show her grace. If you don't have grace, you can't love your neighbor. There are a lot of graceless people out there on the left and the right. A lot of people who claim to be Christians are very graceless. I can't tell you the amount of Catholic bigotry I grew up with. My Protestant friends to this day mean, well, they're not going to heaven. They're Catholic. They don't believe in Jesus. They're Catholic. Some of the greatest prayer warriors for my wife go to Mass every week. There's a level of post-Reformation bigotry against Catholics that they're not real Christians. You see, they're Catholics. That's the way I grew up. I mean, that's pervasive in the South, in the Bible Belt. They're not real Christians. Some of the best Christians I know are great Catholic friends of mine. They worship the same Jesus as you and me. They just do it different. In fact, they have a prettier church service than a lot of us. The stained glass, the incense is beautiful. That's why so many friends of mine have converted to Catholicism and Orthodox, because they love the ritual. It draws them in. It elevates their sense of spirit and self. But regardless, there are a lot of Christians out there, Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant. They don't have a sense of grace anymore. They don't want to hang out with the Joe Biden supporters any more than the Joe Biden supporters want to hang out with the Trump supporters. And we as a nation, the more we become graceless, show each other less grace, and we have less of a forgiving country. And it's becoming very pervasive right now on the left. They can't comprehend not winning. MSNBC told them they were going to win. MSNBC told them there was a massive gender divide. MSNBC told them that Donald Trump had alienated every Hispanic voter out there with Tony Hinchcliffe. MSNBC told them Donald Trump had alienated women. Donald Trump had alienated blacks. Donald Trump had alienated Hispanics. Donald Trump wasn't going to win. MSNBC all but said it frankly. There's no way that an authoritarian can win. And then when he did win, the conclusion is, well, Americans are bad. America's a bad country. We're bad people. Yep, we really were systemically racist. We really are an awful country. We're just as bad as Nicole Hannah-Jones said in the 1619 Project. No grace. No grace. If you don't want to be like the left, show grace. Invite your Kamala Harris voting relative to dinner. If they say no, that's on them. That's not on you. Love them still. Don't rub it in. Be humble. Show humility. Don't talk politics. Find common ground. But you don't be the person to alienate other people. Otherwise, you're no better than them. Show grace. It's what sets us apart from everybody else.
Esse podcast é um oferecimento de Samsung Galaxy AI. E sabe o que mais ele te oferece? Que tal uma nova maneira de buscar na internet a partir de fotos ou do que está na sua tela? Fácil, fácil. Viu? Circulou? Encontrou. Ou quem sabe um assistente de notas para gravar reuniões, transcrever gravações e organizar, produzindo resumos eficientes. Tem tanta coisa que o Samsung Galaxy AI pode fazer por você. Clique aí no banner para descobrir o que. Galaxy AI, a inteligência artificial nas suas mãos.
All right, back to the phones. 877-973-7425 from Pinehurst, North Carolina, God's country. Dave has been waiting super patiently.
Amen.
Dave, welcome.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Earlier you spoke about the actors wanting to leave the country. I don't believe that. I believe they're acting. They've been directed all their lives how to cry and make people feel emotional. And I really honestly feel they're manipulating people to keep them as their flock. You know,
yes.
They're the leader and everybody else is their flock, and they know how to do that. So they're not going anywhere. That's just
there's no, you know. Right? So Dave, I saw this the other day. So Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, was commenting a while back about welcoming Americans to Canada or something, and how you got all these social services in Canada that Americans don't have. I did not realize this, that per capita, Canada is every province of Canada, including its most prosperous province, is poorer than all 50 American states, regardless of which ones you look at. I mean, our three poorest states are New Mexico, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Add in Puerto Rico as well, and Canada is poorer than all of them. There's no way they're moving to Canada. There's the ones who want to move. I saw George Clooney is gonna stay at his house at Lake Como in Italy. Oh, okay, you've already got a house there. You're there all the time. I think you're absolutely right. They were trying to manipulate people. Said, "Oh my gosh, my favorite celebrity is gonna leave." They're not leaving. They've got it too good here. And by the way, they're taxed less here as well. And it's also harder to become a citizen of any one of these other countries, including Canada. There's no way they're going. All right, y'all, I wish I had it with me right now to show you on camera. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm has been rebuilt. They rethought it. And now, not only does it eliminate odors and trap pet dander, pollen, and dust, it also wipes out 99.9% of bacteria and viruses with plasma generation. So it generates ozone to wipe out odors and plasma to wipe out bacteria and viruses, and it just works. You can get 3 of them and save $200 if you go to EdenPureDeals.com and put in the discount code ERIC3, ERICK3. You save $200 and you get 3 of them. They're smaller than the original, and the original was small. You could hold it in the palm of your hand. This one's even smaller. It has a little plug that flips out so you can plug it into the wall. You can still use USB to run it in a car. It wipes out odors. No odor can stand up to it. Cigar odor, cigarette odor, pet odor, dirty diaper odor. You name it, we've had to use it in our house with our sick dog and everything, and it just works. It wipes out odors. Now it wipes out bacteria and viruses as well. It gets rid of pet dander, pollen, dust, you name it. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3.
Tem momento na carreira que precisamos dar passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
Hello there, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Dave, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show. Dave? Hello? Well, he's not there, so I'm going to go to Steve. Welcome to the show, Steve. How are you?
Hey, I'm here.
Welcome.
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing, Eric?
I'm good.
Good. Hey, I love your show. I appreciate the way you share your faith openly, and just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
But my question, I had a scenario. The 2020 census, as far as I'm aware, was faulty, and I think Florida was supposed to get 2 extra. What is it? Representatives or votes?
Yeah. Congressman. Yeah.
And I believe New York and California were supposed to lose seats. So my question was, if Kamala Harris would have ended up with 270 and Trump was at 269, would there have been a Supreme Court challenge on the census?
No, they can't. So everyone, and by the way, Steve, the Democrats and Republicans both agree the 2020 census was terribly flawed. Here's why. The federal government, well, the Constitution, not the federal government, the Constitution requires an actual person-to-person physical count. The census for a number of years had advocated a statistical sampling, that they could use stats based on annual surveys, and they could get a pretty accurate representation of how many people live in each state and where. And the Supreme Court said, no, the actual plain reading of the Constitution and practice for 200 years in the Republic is you actually have to go physically count every single person. And in 2020, it was very hard to do because of COVID. People didn't want census takers on their doorstep. So the census tried very hard to get people to mail the forms back. What happens, for those of you unfamiliar with it, the Census Department mails every American a form to fill out. Some people get the short form, some people get the long form. The long form is the ridiculous one with how many toilets do you have in your house and stuff like that. The short one is who lives in your house, what are their ages, what's your race and ethnicity. That's it. And they hope that everyone will mail those forms back. If you do not mail the form back, someone shows up at your house. A lot of people in 2020 didn't bother participating in the census. There was a massive campaign. States spent millions of dollars to get people to participate in the census, and here's why. It's not just members of Congress that are affected by the census. It's funding for each state is affected by the census. How many people you have in a state matters. One of the big issues for the census as well is that actual people are counted, not citizens. This is one thing I think that should be changed by law. Members of Congress are allocated based on number of people in a state, not number of citizens in a state. And it's one reason the Democrats have been fine with illegal immigration, propping up states. Now, I don't know that most people pay attention to this, and I don't actually think this is a conspiracy theory. I think this is real. The way that our American census works is that members of Congress are assigned based on the number of people in a state, not citizens in a state. So the Democrats flooding states with illegal immigrants have artificially propped up declining states. It is beyond a shadow of a doubt based on the annual census taking that the state of New York, the state of Illinois, the state of California, and other blue states are losing population. Those lost populations of citizens are being offset with gained populations of illegal aliens. So everyone agrees, left, right, and center, the 2020 census was a bad census. It was bad because people didn't participate, and census takers didn't want to go door to door because of COVID. People didn't want them at their house, and so a lot of places were undercounted. That's why the 2030 census is going to be so wild. The 2030 census is going to have a massive shift. So what you probably aren't aware of is the census still does statistical sampling, and the way it does it is employers have to answer questions. So I, as an employer with a small business, am routinely bombarded by the Census Department. And not only am I required to fill out the form, I'm required by law to fill out the form. and my business can get penalized if I don't fill out the form. And I get the form too freaking much. I get it all the time. I am constantly asked by the Census Department to confirm issues for the Bureau of Labor Statistics on employment and all that sort of stuff. And the Census Department takes that data and can generally say, we think this many people are in a state, and it's pretty accurate. But it's not the manual hand count that the Constitution requires, so it can't be used for apportionment for Congress. So in 2030, California is expected to lose 4 congressional seats. And Texas is expected to gain 4 congressional seats. New York is expected to lose 2 more seats. Florida is expected to gain 2 more seats. Illinois is expected to lose a seat. Georgia is expected to gain a seat. Pennsylvania is expected to lose a seat. Arizona is expected to gain a seat. You see what's happening here? In 2030, the Republican advantage in the Electoral College is going to increase. However, caveat. Some of the people leaving Oregon and California and New York and Illinois are still voting Democrat, and they're moving to these other states. So, like, Arizona is going to gain a seat, but it's still going to be a swing state. Texas, however, may gain 4 seats, but it's not as much a swing state as the Democrats want. And Florida is going to gain 2 seats, and it's not a swing state. So the Democrats are going to face an Electoral College serious disadvantage in 2030. Now, here's the other caveat for you. The next presidential election is going to be 2028. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because the next president will pick the next attorney general who will determine how litigious or not to be over the census. See, in 2008, Barack Obama became president. And in 2010, the next census was done, and Eric Holder was the attorney general. And Eric Holder was very litigious with states when it came to implementing Voting Rights Act districts. In 2020, the next census happened. It was a bad census. 2021, Merrick Garland comes in as attorney general, and he as well is very litigious. He sues states like Alabama and South Carolina and Louisiana. And in fact, Democrats broke even. People were expecting a huge Republican advantage. Actually, Democrats did okay because the Democratic Justice Department was very litigious. So now fast forward 2028. I know none of us want to talk about it right now. I know, but just bear with me on this. Whoever wins the next presidency in 2028 is going to preside over this massive shift in the census in 2030. And that person will still be president in 2031 as Republicans and Democrats at the state level are drawing the lines for Congress. The 2028 presidential election is going to be the one that matters. This one doesn't matter as much because the 2028 one will have an attorney general who's in charge in the 2030 census. And those lines are seriously going to disadvantage Democrats, and so Democrats are going to sue the snot out of Republicans. That's just a huge, huge issue. Now, Arthur is calling. Welcome, Arthur, to the show. How are you?
I'm good. 2 quick ones. How high does the FEMA thing go? And why has California not called 9 House races, and they've only counted 70% of the votes for those races?
Okay. Let me do both of these. So for those of you who don't know, the woman who was fired from FEMA, the outside contractor, was interviewed. I think Roland Martin or someone interviewed her, and she says that she was just implementing FEMA policy. This wasn't her policy. She was told by the higher-ups at FEMA that you do not help Trump supporters. They may be violent. That's a big issue. Now, if she's making it up, that's a problem. If she's not making it up, that's a huge problem, and there are going to be prosecutions. You got an incoming Trump administration that's going to investigate the snot out of this. It's a very big deal. Based on what she said, it was the policy of people above her at FEMA that Trump supporters should not be helped. And if you remember, go back to North Carolina, there were people claiming FEMA wasn't helping Trump supporters, and everybody denied it. And in fact, local Republican officials denied it as well. Well, now that raises all sorts of questions. There are going to be prosecutions by the Trump administration. Next, the other issue is, now, Arthur, I'm sorry, my brain farted. What was the other issue? I'll think about it in a minute, Arthur. My apologies. I should have left you on hold, but I thought I could get to it, and then my brain crapped out on what your second issue was. So let me get to David while someone texts me what Arthur was talking about. David, welcome to the show.
Eric, how's it going today?
Good.
Sorry I got disconnected earlier. Listen, you and I could do a whole segment talking about some of the problems with the Harris campaign, but realistically, the one that I've noticed recently is hearing lots of talk about how they need platforms. They need all these, areas where their people can get their message out, as if PSNBC or the New York Times or CNN don't exist. The reality is they have plenty of platforms. They have plenty of reach. They even have audience. They just have no influence.
Yes, and that's the issue. They want their Joe Rogan. Democrats don't seem to realize that they used to have a Joe Rogan who was a huge Bernie Sanders supporter, advanced labor policy, big Democratic issues, and that guy's name was Joe Rogan. And they lost Joe Rogan. Yeah, they refused to go on Joe Rogan's show because Joe Rogan wasn't down with the trans agenda, so they decided he's not one of us. Bernie Sanders supporting socialist Joe Rogan wasn't Democrat enough for the Democrats because he wasn't down with trans sports, and so they abandoned him. And now they're like, we need our own Joe Rogan. You had him. Listen, their problem is they don't like the loss of influence, that nobody's paying attention to them anymore. So now they want their feminized version of Joe Rogan as opposed to the real thing with the real audience that they used to have and lost. Now, back to Arthur's point, Charlie actually apparently listens to the show. The California races. Why hasn't California called them? Okay, a couple things you should know. This tripped up a guy on my Instagram comments. So how many people have voted in the election? 176 million people have voted in the election. How many people? Wait. No, let me make sure I get this right. No. Yeah. So 156 million people have voted in the election. How many people voted in the 2020 election? 158 million people. If you look at the Associated Press reporting right now, it says only about 145 million people have voted. Why? The Associated Press stops adding data after the election. California is still counting votes, though, so the AP is now misleading people with its bad counts. So California still has several seats to call. Why don't they call them? They're under California law. Any ballot that is postmarked on Election Day has to be counted, even if it comes in up to the Friday, the week after the election. So, yes, California is still counting votes and will until this coming Friday. But we know how many ballots were mailed, so we know how many are outstanding, so we know whether there's a path or not to victory. And based on that, we know Decision Desk HQ, the New York Times, and the Associated Press all now agree the Republicans are going to hold Congress, because we know, even though there are some races that haven't been finalized yet, we know that there aren't enough votes outstanding for the Democrat to make up ground. We just have to wait for the votes to come in for the state of California to officially certify the results. That's what's going on here. Yes, it's terrible, and it allows the conspiracy theorists to operate. California should not do this. Can you imagine if California were a swing state? We could literally be waiting weeks for the presidency to be determined. I'm one of the very few people who said there was no way we were going to be waiting even a day to figure out the winner of the presidential race. I was right. Everybody laughed at me and said I was wrong. I was right on that. But if it was California, we really could be. It's wild that the state does that compared to Florida, which had everything done by close of business the night of the election. California made a choice to decline, and California is declining. Now, I tell you all the time about Old Glory, my bank. I have an account with them. I got a checking account. I have a savings account with them. But I haven't done enough to tell you about your business might want to use Old Glory Bank. Old Glory Bank has business checking accounts. Old Glory Bank has business relationships. I have sent multiple friends of mine now who have businesses, and I would call them conservative businesses. They're gun stores. They're gun operators. And they were closed by big national banks that didn't want to do business with gun stores. And so I had to move their business to Old Glory Bank. And Old Glory Bank welcomed them with open arms because they're conservatives. Not only that, here's what one of the companies told me. They actually needed a big loan. They had moved their bank account to Old Glory Bank. They needed a big loan. And they were a little bit concerned that their last bank was giving them the runaround, and they were a physical local branch. Old Glory Bank actually flew someone to their business, inspected the books with them, saw the business, spent multiple days understanding how the business operates, and they were able to get a loan from Old Glory Bank. They were that hands-on. They were worried about using an online bank. They did not have to worry. Old Glory Bank took care of them. They do business checking. They do savings accounts. They do CDs. They do great interest rates and savings. They do mortgages. They do home loans. They do business loans. They do it all. You can get an account with Old Glory Bank very easily at oldglorybank.com. oldglorybank.com. I have my account with Old Glory Bank. I've had them well before they were an advertiser on this show. oldglorybank.com. You get an account for your kids as well. oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. I love this bank so much I've now invested in it. oldglorybank.com. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson. Welcome back. Here at the end, I would like to suggest to those of you living in Arizona. I'm on the radio in Tucson and Phoenix out there. Y'all got to get over Kerry Lake. The amount of people willing to seed conspiracy theories that Kerry Lake won. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Republicans gain seats in the state house and state senate in Arizona. They actually gain seats. Donald Trump won in Arizona. Juan Ciscomani won re-election in Arizona, one of the most embattled Republican members of Congress. He won. The only person who lost is Kerry Lake. You, to believe the conspiracy theory, have to believe that they allowed Donald Trump to win after supposedly stealing it from him the last time, but still were able to steal it from Kerry Lake. It doesn't make sense, and I realize it's not supposed to make sense. It's the people who just can't admit she was a horrible candidate. Absolute candidate. Terrible candidate. And you guys went all in on Kerry Lake. Please get over your obsession with Kerry Lake. She is a terrible candidate for office. She burned bridges with people instead of building bridges with people. She sabotaged Donald Trump by being on the ballot in 2020. And this time, the voters of Arizona were willing to go with Donald Trump and still rejected her. They were willing to go with Republicans across the state of Arizona for the state House and the state Senate. They were willing to go for Republican members of Congress, and yet they rejected Kerry Lake. I would submit to you, Occam's razor would suggest the easiest answer is not that they stole it from her and nobody else, but that she lost because she's a terrible candidate. Arizona Republicans, you could have given the Republicans a 54th seat in the United States Senate, and instead you decided to be crazy. Please bring sanity back to the Arizona Republican Party. Please, for the love of all that is decent and holy, stop believing the lies and the liars, and stop supporting Kerry Lake. She's a garbage candidate who should be placed on the ash heap of history, never to be taken off that pile of trash again. She can stay there. You people are not garbage, contrary to Joe Biden, but she is a garbage candidate. Be rid of her, please.